There are countless videos out there about the Chase and Amex Trifecta and even the Capital One duo these days, but there's one lender that is always left out, and that's Citi. If I'm being completely honest with y'all, Citi is not my favorite lender by any means, but even someone like myself cannot deny the power that their credit cards have, especially whenever you use them in combination with one another. So today we're going to cover the setup that competes at the highest level of the credit card game, but is severely underrated, that being the Citi Trifecta. We'll break this video down into a few main parts. First, we're going to talk about what the Citi Trifecta is in concept. Then we're going to break down each of the cards individually that make up the Citi Trifecta, and we'll actually add in one bonus one if you want to make this the Citi Quadfecta. And then after that, we're going to talk about what actually makes this setup so good and even give an example or two about how you can get the most value from it. And then lastly, we'll talk about why nobody actually talks about this setup and some of the downsides about it. Also, yes, before y'all freak out, one, I am wearing a hat because I guess our water's out in our building today, so no shower for me this morning, but I did actually go ahead and shave my mustache because it just wasn't coming in, and I'm taking a trip this weekend actually, which I'll be on at the time that y'all see this video, and I didn't want these people to think I was crazy with this really weird looking mustache. So for those of y'all that hated it, well, you're welcome. Also, before we dive in, I'd like to mention that if you are somebody that ends up wanting to apply for one of these cards after watching this video, please consider using the links down in my description to go ahead and apply for those cards. One, because it should always give you the highest public welcome offer available on these cards, and two, because you would be directly supporting the channel and just my career at this point at no additional cost to you. And also, Citi doesn't really have a referral program, which is just another reason to go ahead and click those links, and if you do, I thank you in advance for doing so. Of course, we have to kick this off by first answering the question, what is the Citi Trifecta? At a high level, the Citi Trifecta is just a credit card setup composed of 3 different Citi credit cards that all earn Citi ThankYou points. Of course, as goes for any lender, you could technically make a trifecta out of any of their cards that you wanted to, basically, but the well-known Citi Trifecta includes the Citi Double Cash, Citi Custom Cash, and Citi Premier card. We're going to cover some more of the pros and cons of this setup later, as I mentioned, but right off the top, I do want to say that 2 of the main things that I really like about Citi's Trifecta is that 1, it does not have that many overlapping categories among its cards, which is very different from a lender like Chase, who has their Chase Trifecta that have a ton of overlapping categories between their cards. On top of that, this is similar to the Chase Trifecta in a good way. It only comes at you with a cost of $95 per year to hold all 3 of these cards, and whenever you compare that to a setup like Amex's Trifecta that costs $945 per year, that's a really big difference. In reality though, the Citi Trifecta is composed of 3 different cards that each serve a very specific role and will honestly probably maximize your daily spending better than any credit card trifecta out there. But now let's go ahead and get into the card breakdowns, starting with the Citi Double Cash. Y'all probably already know about this card even if you've just barely heard of the credit card game, but the Citi Double Cash is a very straightforward 2% cashback credit card. It has no annual fee, and like I said, gives you 2% back on all of your purchases, 1% whenever you make the purchase, and 1% whenever you pay off your bill. However, I keep saying cashback, but this cashback is actually awarded to you in Citi ThankYou point form. And as we'll talk about later, these points will actually be transferred to your highest tier Citi card in the setup. That way you can get a ton more value than just a flat 2% back that, this card is actually advertised as having. But that flat earning rate does make this a really great catch-all credit card that you can basically use in any situation. And that is really the reason that I'd recommend that you get this card first out of this whole trifecta. That recommendation also just falls in line with my general credit card advice when it comes to applying for credit cards, in which I think you should probably get a catch-all credit card early on in your credit card journey. That way you increase the base earning rate of all of your spending that you're doing. But also, I generally recommend those cards early on because I just know it's not going to be a card that you regret adding. Having a good catch-all credit card is never a bad thing, especially when they're free like the Citi Double Cash is. There are 2 main drawbacks with this card right off the bat that I want to mention. First of all is the fact that it generally does not come with a welcome offer. I guess for my sake, that's a decent thing because that means that y'all can all apply using my links and not really worry about the welcome offer on it. But it does really suck because Citi's had this card around forever and they really have only ever offered a welcome bonus on it very sparingly. On top of that, it does charge foreign transaction fees if you use this card outside of the US, which is something to consider. The second card in this Citi Trifecta though will be the Citi Custom Cash. First of all, this card also has no annual fee, which makes it another really easy recommendation from me. Plus, unlike the Citi Double Cash, this card does generally come with a welcome bonus, and right now it has a $200 welcome bonus after spending $1,500 on the card in the first 6 months of having it. Now this card is what I consider to be the flex card of this setup because what it gives you is 5% back on your highest eligible spending category every single month up to $500 worth of spend. Other than that top category though, or if you go above that $500 spending cap, you're only going to get 1% back on the rest of your purchases. Now the cool thing about this card is that it technically is a rotating category card, but first of all, you don't actually have to activate anything to get that 5% back, but also you can effectively choose what category you're getting 5% back in. The way I do this with my Citi Custom Cash is I only ever put gas purchases on this credit card because gas is one of the eligible 5x earning categories. If I was to put gas on this card and some restaurant spend and some grocery spend, I would only get 5x on that highest eligible spend category every single month. So the way that most people use this card, and it's not exactly how Citi wants you to use it, is by only ever putting one category of spend on this card every month that you generally are going to spend less than $500 on per month. As I said, I use this for gas, but there are a lot of other categories that this card covers, and the 5% eligible categories are restaurants, gas stations, grocery stores, select travel, select transit, select streaming services, drugstores, home improvement stores, fitness clubs, and live entertainment. So obviously there's a lot of optionality there, and if you have something come up in your life where you actually need to use that home improvement store 5x category, you would just stop using this card for gas if that's what you used it for before, and only put home improvement store purchases on this card for that month, and you'd secure 5% back in that category. So as of right now, we have both the Citi Double Cash, which serves as our catch-all card, and the Citi Custom Cash, which serves as our flex card, but we still only have mainly two categories of spend covered between these cards: miscellaneous purchases on the Citi Double Cash and one flex category on our Custom Cash. But there is still one main card that makes up this trifecta, and it honestly brings this whole setup to life. Speaking of bringing a whole credit card setup to life though, one main app I use personally to do that for me is Max Rewards. Before we get too far into this, I want to note that yes, Max Rewards is a sponsor of the channel, but I truly do use their app consistently and personally have no issues with it. What Max Rewards is an app that allows you to pull all of your credit card information into one convenient place, even if those cards come from a multitude of lenders. That way you can see your total card balances, your total point balances, your bill due dates, and more, just all in one place. The fact alone that it even just tells you when all of your bills are due across all of your cards is honestly one of my favorite features about the app, because once you start to add in multiple credit cards to your setup, balancing when all of those credit cards are due and everything is kind of annoying, so getting to see that all in one place is pretty nice. In addition, one of my favorite features about the app is that it does tell you what card to use depending on what exact location you're at, or a location that you know you'll be going to in the future that you can search for. That becomes specifically helpful in a case like we're talking about here today, where you have 3 or 4 different credit cards that you're adding to your setup, and if you don't exactly know what a purchase will code as depending on the location you're at, you can just pull out the app and tell from there. So far, we've just been talking about some of the free features that Max Rewards has, but they do also have a paid tier called Max Rewards Gold. And what that'll do for you is automatically activate your rotating quarterly categories on your cards like your Chase Freedom Flex, for example, but it will also automatically activate all of your credit card offers for you without you having to do any work. So if you've seen my videos before where I have like 300 Amex offers activated on my cards, Max Rewards is what did that for me. In my personal experience, this app has been something that I use on a pretty consistent basis to help me get the most value from my credit cards that I can. So if you're just interested in trying out some of the free features this app has, please be sure to click the link down in my description to sign up for the app. And whenever you sign up and are prompted for a promo code, please use the code Spencer so that they know I sent you. On top of that, you also get 1 free month of Max Rewards Gold if you do ever decide to upgrade, so that's nice too. Thank you to Max Rewards for sponsoring this video, but let's get back to talking about the final card in this Citi Trifecta that is really going to bring it all to life. So now let's go ahead and break down the Citi Premier card. So the Citi Premier card is going to be our first card in this setup that does have an annual fee on it, but it is just a small annual fee of $95 a year. But as you'll see shortly, this card easily makes up its annual fee every single year and could even make it up multiple times over every single year if you use it correctly. Not to mention, right now, at least at the time of me recording this card is coming with a limited time offer of 75,000 Citi ThankYou points after spending $4,000 on the card in the first 3 months of having it. Plus, you'll be able to get 10x back on hotel and car rental bookings through Citi's travel portal through June 30th of 2024. In general though, the Citi Premier card is going to be your workhorse credit card that you put a bulk of your spending on. With this card, you're going to be getting 3x back at restaurants, gas stations, air travel, and hotels. Other than those categories though, you'll only get 1x back. But as you might have just noticed, there is a bit of overlap here between the 3x categories you get on the Citi Premier card and the eligible 5x spending categories you get on the Custom Cash. Of course, this isn't actually any kind of overlap that is going to hurt you because the Custom Cash has like 10 different categories you can choose from, but it's important to note because you don't want to be using the Custom Cash for restaurants while you're already getting 3x back on restaurants through your Premier card. So the most optimal ways to use the cards within the Citi Trifecta here are going to be using the Citi Premier card for all of the 3x categories that it gives you, and then you'll choose one category to get 5x back on that isn't covered by the Premier card, which would likely be something like grocery stores, and then for every other purchase you just use the Citi Double Cash. In addition to the everyday point multipliers on this card, it'll also give you a $100 annual hotel credit as long as you book a single hotel stay of $500 or more using Citi's travel portal. The Citi Premier card is also the only card in this setup without a foreign transaction fee, which makes it one that you can take abroad. And now you may be thinking, okay, well the Citi Premier card gives me 3x on some categories and it also comes with a hotel credit that covers the annual fee for me every year, but is that really worth it? And I'd argue that for some people, that alone is worth it, but we haven't talked about the main way that this card gives you value, and that's going to be by granting you the ability to transfer all of your Citi ThankYou points from any of your credit cards out to Citi's travel partners. However, let's hold on to that thought for a second, and we'll cover more about it here in a little bit. I did mention earlier that there is one other card you could add to the Citi Trifecta to make it a really powerful Citi quadfecta, and that card is going to be the Citi Rewards Plus card. As I just mentioned with the Citi Premier card, one of the most powerful things about this setup as a whole is the ability to transfer your points out to Citi's travel partners. But with this Rewards Plus card in particular, that transferability just got even a little bit more powerful. And the reason I say that is because with this card, you get a 10% rebates on all of the points you redeem up to your first 100,000 points. And that goes for basically every redemption method that you can think of with Citi, but of course in this case we're more thinking about the ability to transfer out to travel partners. I had a pretty lengthy discussion with both GT and Daniel in the credit community Discord, so let me go ahead and walk y'all through our conversation so you can see how people get value from this card. So what Daniel said is that he uses the card for small purchases depending on the merchants, and he actually uses the 10% rebate the most. What he did was stockpile the 100,000 Citi ThankYou points from all of the welcome bonuses he got in the year, and then whenever he redeemed all 100,000 points, he got 10,000 points back. GT also said basically the same thing, but he gave a more specific example here where a couple of months ago he transferred 15,000 points to Turkish Airlines, and almost immediately he got 1,500 points back. I know I also kind of skipped over this when talking about the card in general, but it'll also round up all of your purchases to the nearest 10 points, which is kind of an interesting feature. The reason I didn't mention this before is because I assume you'll be using the other cards in the Citi Trifecta for all of your spending. If you had some small purchases that you wanted to round your points up on, this card could be used to do so, and it does actually give you 2x back on restaurants and gas stations. Plus right now when I'm recording this video, it has a limited time welcome offer of 25,000 points after you spend $1,500 on the card in the first 3 months of having it, plus a limited time deal of 5x back on hotel, car rentals, and attractions excluding air travel, booked through Citi's travel portal through June 30th of 2024. But then continuing our conversation in the Discord, I wanted to know a little bit more about how that rebate actually worked, because I was under the assumption that even if you transferred your points out to Citi's travel partners, only a couple of their travel partners would actually give you that 10% rebate back. But then GT gave me a couple more concrete examples of some bookings he did. One booking for 2 one-way tickets on United for 7,500 points each, and he booked those via Turkish, of course, because United is not a Citi transfer partner, but in doing that he got a 1,500 point rebate. Then he also said that he recently stayed at a Radisson hotel that was 10,000 Radisson points. He got that by transferring his ThankYou points over to Choice hotels and then Choice to Radisson, and he actually was able to only use one Citi ThankYou point to give him 4 Radisson points, which is pretty crazy. And his stay costed a total of 25,000 Citi ThankYou points, and he got a 10% rebate on that of 2,500 points. Daniel followed up on that a little bit more, stating that whenever redeeming through direct deposit, gift card, transfer, or really anything, you're going to be getting that 10% back. But the way that you do that is by linking all of your Citi credit cards together, and the way that he had to do that was by calling Citi, and I think GT said the same. And here I wanted to ask a little bit further because I thought that you had to use the Rewards Plus to redeem to get those 10% rebates, and what both GT and Daniel said is that once you do link all of your cards together, your Citi ThankYou points kind of act as the Amex membership rewards point system works, where they just pool all together and you can use any card to make those redemptions, and you'll get that 10% rebate up to that first 100,000 points redeemed. Hopefully that was kind of helpful to y'all, because I really didn't understand this card fully until I talked to them about it. But the moral of the story is that you can technically get 10,000 points back a year through that rebate feature if you do redeem up to 100,000 points. You can also implement that roundup feature for small purchases if that's something you want to do. Now that we just broke down all of the cards individually, let's bring it all back together to talk about what makes this credit card setup so good. And to kick off this discussion, let's go back and talk a little bit more about Citi's transfer partners. For those of y'all that don't know, Citi has 15 airline and 3 hotel transfer partners. Some of the more notable airlines you may have heard of are going to be Singapore Airlines, JetBlue, Turkish, Avianca, etc. As for hotels, one of the most underrated partners is going to be Choice Hotels, where you can actually get a pretty substantial value from those points, especially if you use them abroad. Plus, from Citi, instead of getting a normal 1-to-1 transfer rate, with Choice Hotels you actually do get a 1-to-2 transfer rate, as GT mentioned earlier as well. But before we get too far into the weeds on this, let me just explain exactly what transferring out to travel partners means. What you're effectively doing by transferring your Citi ThankYou points over to travel partners is directly converting those points from Citi's ThankYou points to another point ecosystem. For example, you can take Citi's ThankYou points and directly transfer them at a 1-to-1 ratio to JetBlue's TrueBlue points. What this allows you to do is directly book your trips through these airline or hotels websites. That way you don't have to use a travel portal or book in cash or something like that. A lot of times whenever you book through their website, you're going to have to use far less points than you would through a travel portal, which is what makes this perk so powerful. On that note, if you look to a blog like the points guy who values credit card points for basically all of the different lenders. Based on their calculations, they say that Citi's ThankYou points on average are worth about 1.8 cents per point. If you did not have the Citi Premier card and couldn't transfer out to travel partners, really the max value you could get from this setup is 1 cent per point. So what you're doing now is effectively increasing the value or the earning categories that all these cards give you. So in doing some simple math, if we now assume that our Citi ThankYou points are worth on average 1.8 cents per point, you can multiply that factor to all of the earning categories on these cards, which basically takes the Citi Double Cash from a 2% card to a 3.6% back card. The Citi Custom Cash goes from a 5% back card to a 9% back card, and the Citi Premier's 3x categories become worth 5.4% back. Again, this is an effective calculation because you're not actually going to be increasing the earning rates that these cards give you, and what you can actually value those earning categories at completely depends on the bookings that you're making. Talking about an average rate of 1.8 cents per point here, but if you're able to get a redemption for like 3 cents per point, then you'd multiply all those base earning categories by 3 to see what these cards are actually giving you, at least for that booking, of course. But also, I know I talked about earlier how the Citi Premier card could pay for itself multiple times over if you use it correctly, and this is exactly what I mean. For example, if you had a trip that you were about to book that would cost $1,000 either through Citi's travel portal or in cash at a rate of 1 cent per point, either way, if you were able to transfer your points out to that travel partner that you're trying to make this booking with and book directly through their website, those 50,000 points at a 1 cent per point valuation are worth $500. So what you just did was get 2 cents per point for that booking because 50,000 points were worth $1,000 in this case, and you technically just saved yourself $500 on that one trip because you had the Citi Premier card and could transfer out to travel partners. So that would pay for the annual fee on the Premier card for 5 years right there with just one trip. Aside from the transfer partners here though, another way that this setup is so powerful goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. The credit cards in this setup are all used for a very specific purpose and do not have overlapping categories. This is a very underrated feature in my opinion because multiple other setups out there, especially one of my favorites, the Chase Trifecta, have so many overlapping categories that it's pretty annoying, and I did actually recently discuss that in a video of mine if you want to watch that later. And on that note, another powerful thing about this setup is that the earning multipliers cover all of your highest spend categories really. Other Trifectas out there are going to leave certain things out. For example, the Chase Trifecta leaves out gas and groceries, which is kind of crazy, and the Amex Trifecta leaves out gas. With the Citi Trifecta, you have gas covered, you have groceries covered, you have restaurants covered, and it's just, you know, all really nice. Another more subtle perk for those of y'all that are really high spenders is that there are no caps on the amount of earnings you can get from these cards, except for the Citi Custom Cash, of course. So the fact that it already has really high earning multipliers is really good for somebody that spends a lot, but on top of that, if you're not capped on the Double Cash or the Premier card, that's just even better. Of course, I could keep listing positives about this setup, but I do want to give you a balanced view of it. So let's talk about why people don't really talk about the Citi Trifecta that much. One of the downsides is that it is technically a travel focused setup if you get the Citi Premier card and want to transfer out to travel partners, but it does not give you any kind of airport lounge access or any kind of VIP experience really. These days, I feel like a lot of travel focused credit cards, even those with just a $95 annual fee, will give you a Priority Pass Select membership, but the only way you could get into one of those is by either paying for it or by having some elite status. Now that is a somewhat annoying thing, but this is a really cheap trifecta, so it's not really that big of a deal. But probably the main downside of this entire setup is the fact that Citi did remove all the travel and other protections on these cards. I think Luke from Luke's Points and Miles has a very valuable perspective on this and kind of explains exactly why this shouldn't deter you from getting Citi's cards. The reason he says that is because if you are somebody who is playing the Points and Miles game, what you're going to be doing is actually transferring all of your points out to travel partners to book your trips instead of paying cash for them. So if you're not putting trips on your credit cards in the first place, then you're already forfeiting those travel protections. The trick to it though is that if you do want those travel protections and you have another card with those protections on them, you can pay the taxes and fees that you would pay for these trips on that credit card in particular, and you'll still get the protections just fine. Do I wish that they didn't take these protections away from Citi's cards in particular? Of course. I think it's really annoying that they would do something like that in the first place, but just realize that it's not as big of a deal as you may have heard other people explain it as. Another possible downside of this setup is that it technically doesn't give you a ton of upside value compared to something like the Amex Trifecta, but again, with the Amex Trifecta, you're going to be paying $945 per year to hold those cards compared to just $95 with the Citi Trifecta, so we're not really comparing apples to apples here. One note I'd have while we're in this section though is to go ahead and make sure that you check up on Citi's application rules here and there, especially if you're watching this at a later date, of course. But I say that because they've been kind of changing around their application rules recently. The Doctor of Credit has a pretty good article on their recent changes at the time of me recording this, and moral of the story is that you should not have any issue getting all 4 of these cards if you want to within a couple of years. But I just bring this up because it is something that kind of annoys me about Citi, and that's the fact that I feel like it's pretty hard sometimes to actually get concrete information about Citi's rules, and I feel like they also just make so many little subtle changes to their cards that actually are negative, but they aren't aren't as in your face as other lenders' changes may be. For example, them removing all of their travel protections. Not a lot of people are going to know about that unless they read the fine print on all these credit cards like us credit card enthusiasts do. Once again though, I have to say that I think this setup is severely underrated, and hopefully this video gave Citi some love whenever nobody else really gives it to them. And once again, I have to reiterate that if you do want to support me and this channel, please consider using the links down in my description to apply for these cards. And if you are somebody who's more interested in the travel focused stuff that I talked about in this video, be sure to watch this video next where you can find some other cards that may fit your needs even better. And as always, Odin and I both want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.